modern war films promise spectacle, but rarely deliver truth. Explosions get louder, but emotions grow weaker. Yet decades ago, British cinema created war stories that felt raw, intimate, and disturbingly real. No heroes polished for glory. No easy victories. Just fierce survival and sacrifice. In this countdown, we uncover 12 forgotten World War II films that strip war down to its core. Stay with me, because each entry reveals something Hollywood has forgotten. Number 12, The Sea Shall Not Have Them, 1954. The war is already lost for them, not in strategy, not in headlines, but in the freezing water where survival becomes a ticking clock no one can hear. This film does not begin with triumph, it begins with absence, a missing crew, a silence over the sea that feels heavier than any explosion. What follows is not a rescue mission built on glory. It is a slow, brutal negotiation with nature itself. The Royal Air Force sets out into a storm that does not care about courage. Waves rise like walls. Visibility disappears. Men speak in short, urgent bursts because there is no time for speeches. Every second is a calculation between risk and death. Unlike modern war films that chase spectacle, this story traps you inside exhaustion. You feel the cold. You feel the doubt. The rescue is not guaranteed. It is earned through persistence and sacrifice. And when survival finally comes, it does not feel like victory. It feels like something barely stolen from the jaws of an uncaring world. Number 11, Millions Like Us, 1943. War is not always fought with weapons. Sometimes it is fought in factories where the noise never stops and the cost is measured in quiet heartbreak. This film shifts the battlefield to the home front, where ordinary women step into roles they never imagined. At first, it feels almost hopeful. New friendships form. There is laughter. There is purpose. But beneath that surface, something begins to change. The routine becomes relentless. The absence of loved ones grows heavier. Letters arrive slower. Then they stop. The film does something modern cinema often avoids. It refuses to isolate war from everyday life. Instead, it shows how war seeps into everything, into conversations, into relationships, into the future itself. A romance blossoms, but it is fragile. It exists under the shadow of something larger and more dangerous than either character can control. When loss finally strikes, it does not come with dramatic music. It arrives quietly, almost casually, and that is what makes it devastating, because it reminds you that for millions, the war was not a single event. It was a constant presence shaping every decision, every hope, every fear. This is not just a story about war. It is about how war changes people long before they ever see a battlefield. Number 10, The Gentle Sex, 1943. They were never meant to stand here, not in uniform, not under command, not inside a war that was supposed to belong to someone else. And yet, here they are, watching, waiting, learning how to survive in a world that does not expect them to last. This film does not shout its message. It builds it slowly. A group of women arrive from different lives carrying different fears. At first there is distance between them, small judgments, quiet uncertainty. The uniform feels like a costume they are not ready to wear. But war does not wait for comfort. It reshapes them through routine and pressure. Training strips away hesitation. Discipline replaces doubt. But the cost is subtle. Loneliness creeps in. Letters become lifelines. Every connection feels temporary because the future itself feels unstable. What makes this story powerful is its restraint. It does not turn these women into symbols. It allows them to remain human, flawed, vulnerable, determined. Their strength is not loud. It is built through endurance. And as the war closes in, you begin to understand something deeper. They are not just supporting the war effort. They are redefining their place within it. As is by the end, the question is no longer whether they belong. The question is what happens when the war ends and the world expects them to disappear again. Number 9, Above Us, The Waves, 1955. Some missions are planned on paper. This one is planned inside fear, deep beneath the surface where light disappears and silence becomes the only protection left. The objective sounds simple. Destroy a heavily guarded German battleship hidden within narrow fjords. But nothing about this operation is simple. The men chosen for it must travel in miniature submarines where space is almost non-existent. Every breath feels measured. Every movement feels dangerous. What follows is not a rush of action. It is a slow tightening grip of tension. The closer they move toward the target, the more fragile everything becomes. At one mistake, and the entire mission collapses. Detection means death. There is no escape route, only forward. The film refuses spectacle. Instead, it builds pressure through detail. The mechanics of the mission, the precision required, the mental strain of staying focused while surrounded by invisible threats. You begin to feel the weight of the water pressing in from all sides. And when the moment finally comes, it is not chaos. It is controlled intensity. Every second stretched to its limit, every decision final. Victory here is not loud. It is quiet, calculated, earned through discipline and sacrifice. And long after the mission ends, one truth remains. Some battles are not fought in open fields. They are fought in silence where survival depends on how long you can hold your nerve. Number 8, the Colditz story, 1955. There are prisons. And then there is Colditz, a place designed not just to contain bodies but to break intention itself, a fortress where escape is not just unlikely. It is almost an insult to attempt it. Yet inside these walls, something refuses to die, not hope, something sharper, defiance. This film does not rely on action to create tension. It relies on time. Long stretches of waiting where nothing seems to happen, yet everything is at stake. Officers from different nations are locked together, bound by one shared objective: escape. Not because they believe they will succeed, but because refusing to try would mean surrendering something deeper than freedom. Every plan begins in whispers. Every movement is calculated. Guards are not fools. They adapt. They anticipate. They punish quickly. And still the prisoners continue. Digging. Disguising. Deceiving. Each failed attempt tightening the noose, yet somehow strengthening their resolve. What makes this story gripping is the psychology behind it. You begin to see how routine becomes resistance, how boredom becomes a weapon, how intelligence becomes survival. There are no grand speeches, no cinematic shortcuts, just persistence wearing down, impossibility one attempt at a time. And then comes the realization. Escape is no longer the end goal. It is the process itself that keeps them alive. The act of trying becomes their identity. By the end, Colditz no longer feels like a prison alone. It feels like a battleground where the enemy is not just outside the walls, but inside the mind. And the only victory that matters is refusing to break. Number 7, the ship that died of shame, 1955. The war ends. The uniforms come off. The medals are stored away. And suddenly there is nothing left to hold these men together except memory. And memory is not enough. This film begins where most war stories stop, in the silence after victory, where purpose fades and something darker takes its place. A once proud naval crew finds itself adrift, not at sea but in identity. The ship that carried them through danger now carries something else. Smuggling, deals made in shadows. Lines crossed quietly at first, then without hesitation. At the center of it all is a tension that never explodes, yet never fades. A sense that something sacred is being corrupted. The ship becomes more than wood and steel. It becomes a reflection of the men themselves. Once disciplined, now drifting. What sets this film apart is its refusal to blame war alone. Instead, it asks a harder question. What happens when men trained for conflict are returned to a world that no longer needs them? The answer is not simple. It is not clean. It is uncomfortable. Loyalty fractures. Decisions grow heavier. And beneath it all, there is guilt. Not loud guilt. Quiet guilt that lingers in every glance and every silence. The atmosphere tightens with each scene. Not because something dramatic happens, but because you can feel the inevitable approaching. A collapse not of structure, but of morality. By the time the story reaches its end, you understand that this is not about crime. It is about loss. Loss of purpose. Loss of identity. Loss of the very code that once defined these men. And that loss feels far more devastating than any battle they survived. Number 6, Albert R. N., 1953. To trust is the first thing that dies in a prison camp. Not hope, not strength, trust. And once it is gone, every face becomes a question you cannot answer. This film steps into that fragile space where survival depends on deception. So convincing, it begins to reshape reality itself. A British officer takes on a role no one would willingly choose. He becomes a collaborator, at least on the surface. The plan is precise but terrifying. To gain the confidence of German authorities, he must betray his own kind in appearance, if not in truth. Every word he speaks is measured, every action calculated. But the danger does not come only from the enemy. It comes from those watching him from within. Fellow prisoners who do not know the truth, who cannot afford to believe it. What follows is a slow psychological tightening. That's conversations become interrogations without warning. Suspicion spreads quietly. The line between performance and identity begins to blur. Because to survive the act, he cannot slip even for a moment. Not in public, not in private. The brilliance of the film lies in its restraint. There are no sudden bursts of action, no heroic speeches to clarify intent. Only tension built through silence and uncertainty. You are never fully sure who believes what. And that uncertainty becomes the real battlefield. As the plan moves forward, the cost becomes unavoidable. Isolation deepens, relationships fracture. The role begins to consume the man playing it. By the end, the question is no longer whether the mission will succeed. It is whether he can return to himself after living so convincingly as someone else. And that is where the film leaves its deepest mark, in the realization that sometimes the greatest risk is not death. It is losing who you are while trying to survive. Number 5. The Wooden Horse, 1950. Nothing about this escape looks dramatic. That is exactly why it works. Inside a guarded camp where every movement is monitored, a simple object becomes the center of a plan so patient it almost feels invisible. A wooden vaulting horse placed in the yard for exercise. Guards see routine, prisoners see opportunity. Beneath that structure, a tunnel begins to take shape. Not quickly, not boldly, but slowly, painfully. Inch by inch carved out of earth that resists every attempt to be moved. The men involved do not rush because rushing would expose everything. They move with precision, with discipline, with a quiet understanding that one mistake ends it all. What makes this film so gripping is its commitment to realism. There are no shortcuts, no sudden leaps forward. Every stage of the escape is shown with careful detail. The digging, the concealment, the coordination required to keep the illusion intact. Time becomes the enemy. Not guards, not weapons. Time. Because the longer the plan continues, the greater the chance of discovery. Fatigue builds, pressure increases, doubt begins to surface. Yet the operation continues because stopping is not an option. The tunnel is no longer just a path to freedom. It is proof that resistance still exists. When the escape finally unfolds, it does not explode into action. It releases tension that has been building for the entire film. A quiet moment that carries the weight of everything that came before it. And in that moment, you understand the true nature of courage here. Not bold defiance, not reckless action, but the ability to endure repetition, uncertainty, and fear without losing focus. Freedom was never going to be taken in a single act. It had to be earned slowly beneath the surface where no one was supposed to be looking. Number 4. We Dive at Dawn, 1943. You do not see the enemy, you feel them. Somewhere above, somewhere beyond the steel walls that separate life from crushing darkness. This film drops you into a submarine where space is tight and silence is survival. There is no room for hesitation here. Every sound carries meaning. Every mistake echoes. The mission begins with clarity. A strike against enemy shipping. All straightforward on paper. But beneath the surface, nothing is ever simple. The crew moves as one unit because they have no other choice. Orders are given quickly, executed instantly. There is no space for doubt once the dive begins. What makes this story powerful is how it builds tension without spectacle. The danger is constant but rarely visible. Depth charges detonate somewhere in the distance, then closer. The hull creaks under pressure, reminding everyone how fragile their protection really is. Inside this confined world, personalities fade into function. Each man becomes part of a system that must operate flawlessly. Trust is absolute because failure is collective. If one breaks, everyone pays the price. Moments of calm are deceptive. They never last. The next threat is always approaching unseen. And that uncertainty becomes the real weight pressing down on the crew. The film captures something modern war cinema often overlooks: the mental strain of waiting, the discipline required to remain still while danger surrounds you, the courage needed to act when every instinct tells you to hide. By the end, survival feels less like victory and more like endurance. A reminder that some battles are not fought with visible enemies, but with pressure, fear, and the constant awareness that one wrong move ends everything. Number 3. The Dam Busters, 1955. Before the mission, there is doubt, not from the enemy, from within. Because the idea itself feels impossible. This film begins not with action, but with obsession, an engineer chasing a concept that refuses to cooperate, a weapon that must behave in ways no weapon ever has. Next to the bouncing bomb is not introduced as genius. It is introduced as a problem that keeps failing. Test after test produces frustration. Calculations change, expectations shift. And with every delay, the pressure builds because war does not pause for innovation. It demands results. Parallel to this struggle are the men who will carry that idea into reality. Pilots trained for precision at a level that leaves no room for error. Flying low, at night, over water, with obstacles closing in from every direction. The brilliance of the film lies in how it connects these two worlds. The minds creating the solution and the men risking their lives to execute it. Each depends entirely on the other. If one fails, both fail. When the mission begins, tension replaces doubt. The aircraft move forward into darkness, where visibility is limited and danger is immediate. Every second becomes critical. Altitude must be exact. Speed must be controlled. Timing must be perfect. And when the bombs are finally released, it is not a moment of celebration. It is a moment of release, a culmination of pressure that has been building from the very beginning. The film does not ignore what follows: loss, consequence, the reality that success in war always carries a cost. What remains is not just the memory of the mission, but the understanding of what it required: persistence, precision, and the willingness to pursue something that seemed impossible until it was not. Number 2. In Which We Serve, 1942, 350 words. Memory is all they have left, not weapons, not orders. Just fragments of a life that existed before everything changed. The film opens in aftermath rather than action. A naval ship destroyed, survivors scattered across open water, holding on to wreckage that barely keeps them alive. There is no immediate rescue, only waiting. And in that waiting, the past begins to surface. Through shifting memories, we see who these men were before the explosion. Husbands, sons, ordinary individuals shaped by routines that now feel distant. The film does not rush these moments. It lets them breathe, because understanding what was lost is essential to understanding what remains. What makes this story extraordinary is its structure. It refuses to isolate war as a single event. Instead, it weaves together past and present, showing how identity is carried into battle and reshaped by it. The calm of earlier days contrasts sharply with the harshness of survival at sea. The performances are restrained yet deeply affecting. No one overstates their fear. No one dramatizes their pain. It is all contained beneath the surface, which makes it feel real. Conversations are brief. Glances carry meaning. Silence speaks louder than words. As time stretches on, the question shifts from rescue to endurance. How long can they hold on? Not just physically, but emotionally. Because each passing moment forces them to confront what they might never return to. When help finally arrives, it does not feel like triumph. It feels like continuation, a chance to carry forward what remains of who they were. And that is where the film leaves its mark. Not in the destruction of the ship, but in the quiet realization that survival is only the beginning of what comes next. Number 1. The Way Ahead, 1944. 350 words. Before war creates soldiers, it gathers strangers. Men who have nothing in common except the fact that they have been called to serve. This film begins in uncertainty. Recruits arrive carrying pieces of their previous lives, different accents, different attitudes, different expectations. There is no unity here, only confusion and resistance. Training does not transform them instantly. It breaks them down first. Discipline is enforced. Mistakes are exposed. Weakness becomes visible in ways that cannot be ignored. Some adapt quickly, others struggle. A few question whether they belong at all. What sets this story apart is its honesty. It does not rush the process. It shows how cohesion is built slowly through shared experience rather than imposed authority. Bonds form not because they are required, but because survival demands it. As the group evolves, individuals begin to change. Confidence replaces hesitation. Purpose replaces uncertainty. But the film never lets you forget how fragile that transformation is, because none of them truly understand what awaits beyond training. When deployment finally arrives, the tone shifts. The structure of preparation gives way to the unpredictability of war, and in that shift, the audience sees the full weight of what these men have become, not heroes in the traditional sense, but individuals shaped by necessity. The strength of the film lies in its restraint. It avoids glorification. It focuses instead on process, on the journey from civilian to soldier and the cost of that journey. By the end, you are left with a simple but powerful truth. War does not create perfect men. It creates survivors. And even that comes at a price few are ready to pay. These films do not ask for attention. They demand reflection. They remind us that war is not spectacle, but consequence. If this list changed how you see war cinema, then let me know below and tell me which forgotten films deserve to be rediscovered next.